Hello students, welcome again. In today's video we will continue our discussion about the different characteristics of a instrument. Okay, in our previous lecture we discussed that precision is the conformity of the readings when we are going for the multiple measurement of the same quantity. Okay, in our last video we discussed an example and we measured the same resistance R1 5 times. Okay, and the reading was 3297 ohm, 3309 ohm, 3285 ohm, 3317 and 3261. Okay, when we measured the same resistance 5 times with our given instrument, the readings were like that. Okay, but the instrument's display system has two significant digits and it has a display with the unit kilo ohms. Okay, so if this is our measuring instrument and it displays like that, it displays in two digits with the unit kilo ohm. Whatever reading comes, it will be rounded off and it will be mentioned in this manner. So every time if the reading is 3297, it will be displayed by 3.3 kilo ohm. This will be again displayed by 3.3 kilo ohm. Okay, this is again 3.3 kilo ohm, 3.3 kilo ohm and 3.3 kilo ohm. So despite all the readings are different, still the display is 3.3 kilo ohm and user is reading it as a 3.3 kilo ohm. So each time the user is noting down the reading as 3.3 kilo ohm and it seems the measuring unit is highly precise. But this is not a correct statement because of lack of significant digits. Our repeated readings are same but the measurement is different. So our instrument is not accurate but it is reflecting high precision because of lack of significant digits. We don't have sufficient significant digits. So we are getting the same reading that is not accurate. So there is a statement, high precision does not guarantees the accuracy. Okay, this kind of statement is frequently asked in exam to create a confusion among the students. So please note down this statement in your notebook on the header space. Okay, and secondly, precision is a function of number of significant digits. If you are having sufficient significant digits, then only you can say that your readings are accurate as well as your instrument is highly precise also. So merely having the same reading or high precision does not guarantees that your instrument is very accurate. So to overcome this problem, we should have number of significant digits should be sufficient. Okay, if we are having instrument that has such kind of display that displays the result in ohm with 4 significant digits, then every time there will be a different reading. It will be 3297, 3309. So when we replace two significant digits by 4, our readings are different and we are not saying that our instrument is accurate. So because of lack of significant digits, if there is an error in measurement, we will define it as a precision error. Okay, and to remove the precision error, we should have sufficient significant digits in the display of the measuring unit. Okay, I think this is clear to you. And there is another type of objective problems that is frequently asked in your exam. They are giving you some readings and they are asking what is the significant digits in this measurement. For example, there will be 325 ohm, 320.9 ohm, 126.12 ohm, 120 into 10 raised to power 3 ohm, and there can be 1245.6 into 10 raised to power 3 ohm. Okay, these are few readings and there may be match the following, the number of significant digits will be given in the second column and you are asked to match the number of significant digits. Okay. So if your display system is having 3 significant digits like this, 3, 2, 5, it means you can measure 0.002 ohm with this measuring unit, and whatever reading comes, that is more near to 3 to 5 compared to 3 to 4 and 3 to 6. You can differentiate your readings by a difference of 1 ohm. Okay. So significant digits are number of digits that will be used in the display of measuring unit. Okay. Generally significant digits are a property of a digital display system or measuring unit that has a digital display system. Okay. Whereas if your instrument has such kind of display, then it will have 320.9. So you can measure 10th part of a ohm and you can find out that your resistance is near to 320.9 compared to 320.8 and 321 ohm. So you are able to differentiate or find out the gap up to the 10th part of 1 ohm. So if you have such kind of display, you can have more accurate and more close readings. Now your accuracy and precision can be a comparable quantity. In this measuring instrument, you are able to measure the gap up to the 100th part of a ohm, and this instrument will give you more accurate result with high precision also. So significant digits are number of digits that are used in display system. In this, if they are going to ask you what are the number of significant digits, in this case this will be 3, in this case this will be 4, 320.9. So you have to calculate the total number of digits in the measurement and you will find out the significant digits. You will calculate both the decimal digits and fractional digits. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here the significant digits are 5. Be careful whenever there is a multiplication factor or kilo ohm or mega ohm, you will calculate only the number. Okay. In the numerical value, you will have 120 into 10 raised to power 3 ohm will have a significant digits of number 3. Okay. When you are having such kind of display, on the display there will be 3 bits, 3 digits reserved for the numerical value, and this 10 raised to power 3 will be mentioned in the scale manually. So you can read 120,000 kilo ohm to 999 kilo ohm. This multiplication factor is additional part mentioned in the scale, or you can have a scale of like this also, ohm, kilo ohm. So these are standard units. How much sections or digits are there will be considered as a significant digits. In this case there will be significant digits of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Ignore the 10 raised to power 3 or kilo ohm. Okay. So this is another variety of problem that is frequently asked in your competitive exams. So I explained this in detail. I think now the significant digits, what does it mean by significant digits and how it plays an important role to describe the precision of our instrument is clear to you. Now another important parameter related to the measurement system is hysteresis effect. Your measurement system or measurement unit is based on a physical phenomena, either it's a magnetic field, electric field, polarization of the material, etc. And if you apply a excitation, you get some response. When you remove that excitation, maybe the response is not following the same manner when you initialize the process, and non-coincidence of loading and unloading effect. Okay. When your process is not following the same path, then you will say that loading and unloading conditions are different, and this non-coincidence is defined as hysteresis effect, or the losses that occurs because of this phenomena is defined as the hysteresis losses. To explain this in a detail, we would like to discuss it with the magnetization of ferromagnetic material. Some metals like iron, cobalt, nickel, these are originally non-magnetic, and when you place these material in a strong magnetic field, there will be a magnetic dipole rearrangements. It start to reflect some magnetic properties that will be defined as a magnetization of the material. And when you start to remove the applied magnetic field, the reverse process or the removal of magnetization is not same as it started. Okay, so if you apply the magnetic field, initially it was reflecting zero magnetization. As you increase the magnetic field, your magnetization is increasing like that. Okay, this is the loading curve or loading effect of magnetization of ferromagnetic material. Now after a while you start to remove the magnetic field, and as you start to decrease the applied magnetic field, magnetization does not follow the same path. Demagnetization does not follow the same path, and it comes like that. And at the origin, when applied magnetic field is zero, there is not zero magnetization. There is some magnetic properties that still remains in the material, because some magnetic dipoles are aligned and they have some magnetization, and you don't have a zero magnetic properties now in a ferromagnetic material. So this is loading curve and this is unloading curve. When you apply some excitation, when you remove the excitation, they are not coincident to each other, and this phenomena is defined as the hysteresis effect. To make this magnetization zero, you have to apply magnetic field of opposite polarity, and the complete curve will be like this. Okay, and the area between these curve can be defined as the hysteresis losses that occurs between the magnetization and demagnetization of a given ferromagnetic material. So I think now hysteresis effect is what does it mean by hysteresis effect or hysteresis losses is clear to you. Then comes the next term, that is threshold. Okay, what is a threshold value of an instrument or a measuring unit? Basically this is a minimum input that is required to notice the readings. Before this, your instrument is showing zero deflection, you are not able to sense any change in the output. For example, you are having a silicon diode, okay, and you want to apply this silicon diode in the form of a rectifier. So you want to measure the output current until you are having a input voltage greater than 0.7 volt. There will be no current because of the built-in potential across this junction, and below 0.7 volt your output current will be zero. You will start to notice the undercurrent after the 0.7 volt. Threshold value is the minimum input that is required to record the output or the response in the measuring unit. Okay, threshold value. Threshold value is a limitation of the measuring unit. It may be because of the friction, it may be because of the built-in potential or some different parameters that are governing our instrument. Then very similar term, that is dead zone. Students most of the time get confused about the threshold and dead zone. Dead zone is a range of inputs where there is no output, there is no response you notice in the circuit. So to explain the dead zone, we can take an example that we are having two diodes, Zener diodes, okay, and we are applying some input and we have to measure the output current. Okay, so for example, this diode has a Zener breakdown 5 volt, this has a Zener breakdown of 2 volt. So in a positive cycle, this diode is ready to conduct, it is ready to conduct the current, but this diode is in reverse bias and it will not allow the current till the voltage crosses the 5 volt, because this is in the reverse bias. So in positive polarity, until your input crosses the 5 volt, there will be no current. We are making the input output between the V applied and I output. Okay. So until in positive polarity, if positive cycle does not cross the 5 volt, there will be no response. As it crosses the 5 volt, Zener breakdown take place, and this is already ready to conduct the to allow the current. After the 5 volt, there will be a current in this direction, and it will defined as a I maximum in positive polarity. So as you cross the plus 5 volt, there will be a sudden change in current. Okay, there will be current conduction, and this will be I maximum. Okay, we are considering both the diodes are ideal and they just behave as a short circuit or open circuit when they are conducting or non-conducting. And in second polarity, when your negative polarity signal comes in, this diode is ready to conduct, but this is in the reverse bias and it will not allow the current until it faces a 2 volt. In reverse bias, then it crosses the 2 volt, it will have a Zener breakdown and it will allow the current to pass through. So in reverse bias or in negative polarity, until we reach the 2 volt, there will be no current, and as we reach the 2 volt, there will be a maximum current in the opposite direction. So in the reverse, in the negative polarity, up to minus 2 volt, there will be no current, and all of a sudden there will be a current that is in the reverse direction, I maximum. So in this circuit, we are not getting any response I output in the range plus 5 volt and minus 2 volt. Until our voltage crosses the plus 5 volt, there will be no current. After the plus 5, you are getting the I maximum in a particular direction. In negative polarity, until our signal crosses the 2 volt, there will be no output, and after that you are getting a current in the reverse direction. So in this range plus 5 volt to minus 2 volt, there is no current, there is no response recorded in the unit, and this range is defined as a dead zone. Okay, this dead zone, in this case dead zone is minus 2 to plus 5 volt. In case of this can be 0 to 3 volt, this can be minus 1 to 5 volt. Okay, this can be minus 3 to minus 7 volt. Simply a range of input where there is no excitation is recorded in the circuit is defined as the dead zone, and it depends over the circuit components and the basic designing of the measuring unit. This kind of problems are frequently asked in the objective problems, so I explained this phenomena in a bit detail. Okay. Threshold and dead zone are very similar, so be a bit careful when you are understanding these phenomena. Threshold is because of initial limitations of the measuring unit, and dead zone can be varied according to the circuit parameters or design parameters of your measuring unit. Okay. So these all effects that are linearity, accuracy, resolution, precision, and threshold, hysteresis, significant digits, these are basically related with the static characteristics of a instrument. When we are having some discrete measurements and your signal is not going changing with the time. Okay, when your signal is changing with the time, you are quite concerned about the dynamic characteristics of the instrument, and in that case you will be quite aware to consider the speed or bandwidth of the instrument. So when your input signal is time variable, you will consider speed and bandwidth of the instrument. If you have to measure this kind of signal, you are having an input signal of less frequency. If you have to measure this kind of signal, that is with a higher frequency, you should have an instrument that is quite fast, that can sense a very fast variation in the input, and you need an instrument that is having a response time lesser than the first case, so that you can have a faithful or a accurate reading. Okay. So in dynamic, these are dynamic characteristics. Speed means how fast your instrument can take the readings. This is generally expressed in form of rise time. Rise time is the time taken by the instrument or unit to reach the 90% of its maximum value. So rise time, lesser the rise time, faster your instrument, and it can record the input with the higher frequency. Okay, and delay time, rise time, these all are different parameters. And to have a measurement with high frequency, you need a instrument that can work on a high speed. Okay, second term that comes along with dynamic characteristics is bandwidth. Okay, basically to measure this input, you require a signal, you require a unit that has a high speed. Okay, there may be a chance that your input is not having a fixed frequency. You have to measure the signal. For example, you have to measure the intensity of the audio signal. So audio signal 0 to for example 4 kilohertz. It can be between any kind of frequency, or we can say 20 to 4 kilohertz. So your instrument should be able to handle such range of frequency. It should be having the speed that it can measure the signal of 20 hertz, it can measure the signal of 4 kilohertz also. So this is the range of frequency for which our instrument should be able to track the changes, dynamic changes in the input. So bandwidth is range of frequency. Okay, bandwidth is the range of frequency for which our instrument should be able to measure the input signal. Be careful if you are having a fixed frequency signal. If you are applying a fixed frequency signal that is very high frequency signal, then you are concerned about only the rise time or speed of the signal, speed of the measuring unit. But when you have to consider a range of frequencies, then you will consider the bandwidth of the instrument also. Bandwidth is range of frequency. All the amplifier and attenuator and resistance, capacitor, they all should be able to work in this range to record the change in input and give you a proper reading. Bandwidth and rise time are correlated to each other, and many times there is a numerical correlation that is being asked in the competitive exam. So please note down this correlation. Many times there is a numerical relationship between the bandwidth and the rising time, and in objective problems examiner frequently asks that if this is the rise time of the measuring unit, what will be the bandwidth? That can be honestly measured by the instrument. So please note down this formula. In small objective problems or in a 1 marks question, you can find out this formula. For example, if the examiner mentions the rise time of a given measuring unit is 35 millisecond. Okay, what is the bandwidth of this measuring unit? So bandwidth will be 0.35 divided by TR, that is 35 millisecond, that is 0.35 into 10 raised to power 3 divided by 30. It means 10 hertz. Okay, this is the bandwidth of the instrument with the rise time of 35 millisecond. If it becomes 35 microsecond, then it will become 10 kilohertz. Okay, 10 kilohertz. In case of 35 microsecond, it will be 10 kilohertz. Okay. So there will be a vice versa problem. Bandwidth will be given, and they can ask about the what will is the tentative rise time. So this a very popular and very simple formula that can be used to calculate the tentative relationship between the bandwidth and the rise time. So I hope the different characteristics that you should consider to select a proper and a suitable measuring unit for your application is now clear to you, and we will keep discussing the different parameters related to the type of error in our next video. Keep learning, keep watching. Thank you.